Okay, we are live.
Wonderful. As I button up my shirt right here, right?
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay. You have a
Yep.
very, you've got a lot of your neck covered, so I feel like I want to. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right.
Welcome, welcome. I know this is like part athleisure wear, and I don't want to look too business, but not business enough. Welcome, David, in
Yes.
our third and final installment episode, I guess, of this series, the really unmasking your company's true identity. And we are going to land the plane today and kind of wrap all three sessions together. And we've also been uploading these onto YouTube so people can go back and watch the longer forms and share with their teams as you all prepare to end the year, plan your year, and offsite, whatever it is, right? Being able to use the content and wisdom and these last three series. So welcome, David. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thank you again, Mel. I'm David Shechtman. I've worked as an executive coach and leadership advisor for about the last quarter century at this point. I've been in a family business. I've been on my own, and I've been a partner in evolution for just under a decade. I really enjoy working with high growth organizations in high growth industries. And for me, a lot of my work is about really going deep with leaders and helping them not only individually grow and develop in their role, but helping them really be the powerful and capable leaders for their organizations.
Awesome. Welcome. I'm Mel Gordon. I know David through our amazing global coaching and consulting firm. And gosh, about 2 years now, I joined right after I sold my own software company that I was the CEO of for 10 years. And our part one was really around unmasking your company's true identity. We had a link over to a questionnaire kind of survey thought exercise that we'll link as well into the videos. Part two was scaling with soul, maintaining your essence as you grow. And today is around strategic moves, right? Aligning those decisions with company vision. And so we're going to be kicking that off as well. All right. So, David, I know we've chatted a little bit about innovators' dilemma. Do we want to kick it off with a little bit of what that is, how that plays into all of this?
Yeah, sure. I think that is a good place to start. My experience with work in this space over the years has led me to conclude that many leaders believe that the hard part is coming together, bringing in disparate voices, working through the challenges of identifying who we are, where we're going, what it means, the mission, and that whatever investment of time that they put into that front end activity is the hard work. And after that, it goes into execution mode, and execution mode is maybe not easy, but it's easier. That would be the mindset that I
Mm-hmm.
encounter from time to time. And I think it's basically opposite of that. My experience has been that, yeah, it's not easy to get people together and get all the voices in the room and kind of thrash it out and figure out exactly who we are, where we want to go. That is by no means easy. But any sense of cruise control or autopilot after that just doesn't work. That the hardest part is often staying connected to that identity and vision and values and bringing that knowledge and connection into day-to-day, week-to-week decision making.
Mm-hmm.
It is not just hard because of the intensity that is present in most people's lives. It's not just hard because of the competing demands for time. It's hard because of the forces at work all the time that are attempting to, and I'm not saying this is a conscious process or a deliberate process, but obfuscate the vision, shift and creep the identity, and essentially rewrite all of that as things play out, because we don't live in a static environment. We have news happening, we have people's lives playing out, we have unexpected surprises that no one saw coming, exogenous shocks, etc. And so when a person is thinking about being in an innovation role, they're not only trying to figure out like, what is the market looking for and what is the opportunity that I can advance, but they also need to know, when do I stick with what I've got and when do I disrupt myself, even if the disruption means a short-term pain for a long-term gain. And the clarity for making that decision has got to come not only from the immediate pressures, but from the awareness of and connection to the path that was set.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know that we were chatting about this last week, as lots of teams and companies are hopefully already scheduled and planning their 2025 planning, strategic or offsites or recap of the existing year. And so when we talk about aligning decisions, we were also talking about just different decision-making frameworks and that sort of thing. And one thing that really came up for us was around groupthink. Is something that is a constant. I mean, it can be a constant battle unless you have to be intentionally aware and thinking of it. And we're starting to see little trips where we can see some of our own existing clients kind of get tripped up by this. I wanted to kind of dive in the deep end there and like speak to examples and what we see and how we try to nudge and encourage our leaders to see those blind spots, right? On groupthink that is so common in these team offsites, right? Everyone's exhausted. It's the end of the year. There's a lot going on around the world. But how can we make sure that we're just not, I don't want to say giving up, because sometimes you have to be aware that something's there in order to give up, right? So we're also talking about like it's an unconscious thing often, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What would you say on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really great. I think what I'd love to do is just share some of my point of view on the topics you're discussing, and then let you and I share some examples of where this has come up and how we've managed and faced and dealt with it over the years. The first is that I think groupthink is a very, very subtle but powerful danger that exists in the corporate world. And I say that not because of, just the sort of obvious, challenge and the obvious, I guess, sort of preference that a lot of people have for harmony and for expediency, but also because it is the friction, really, as I see it, that creates the growth, that creates the mastery, that creates the long-term success. I'm not looking for more pain in my life. I'm not looking for more ongoing discomfort. I mean, that's not what I'm waking up saying to myself and journaling every morning. But I know in my soul that when I challenge others and I am challenged by others, I'm a better person. I'm a better leader.
100%.
I don't want that. I would prefer not to deal with that on a regular basis. And I've accepted it's the reality. And so, first off, I think there's just a basic choice that organizations need to make, certainly at the leadership level. And that is, are we going to create space for friction in the organization, believing that that friction is going to sharpen our skills, sharpen our understanding, and sharpen our movement or our clarity as to what's most important? Or are we going to go along to get along and then wake up on the verge or precipice of a crisis and then make radical changes?
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes think of this when especially those of us who live in the western part of the U.S., we have fires, right, forest fires to deal with on a regular basis, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And you can do selective sorts of logging and burning and forest management, or you can wait until the whole thing explodes. Either way, you're going to get fire, you're going to get regeneration, you're going to get new growth. I'd rather actively manage it and drive it towards the outcome that we're going to get to anyway, with a lot fewer casualties and a lot less damage.
Yes.
So I think groupthink leads to that forest fire effect is my experience and what I really have come to believe. So I want to be in a situation where we're having a little bit of daily, weekly, monthly struggle, where I'm frustrated and sometimes questioning things, but trusting the process and recognizing that all this mixing it up and all these moments of questioning and confusion are actually leading me where I want to go, as opposed to just simply creating more, struggle in my day-to-day experience. So I think that's just like a choice to make and a philosophy to carry.
Yeah, 100%. I was looking at some of the questions that I wrote down where, how often does groupthink shape our boundaries? And are there instances where reluctance to break from the norm has compromised our vision? And I was giving an example of a client that I'm working with now as they plan and prepare for their offsite actually next week, which then happened to be the busiest month of the entire year. And I was coaching an individual leader in the C-suite and said, well, then why was the meeting even scheduled then? Are we pushing back? And it really just opened up our conversation to what is the structure of the offsite? How is it being handled? And I quickly realized that she was going to be the only female in the room.
Mm.
And one of her other colleagues, male, recognized it and said, oh, wouldn't that be interesting then if we recommended to the CEO that we bring in a facilitator to add balance to the room? But also the suggestion came as, hey, we had one of these earlier this year and it didn't go very well.
Mm.
And so then it became my role to support these two team members, right? And how they could bring it and position it to the CEO, because oftentimes that's the person you have to get on board. They're not the one that's on board. You have to advocate, right? To push that. So what are some concrete examples, like in this, in this example, or even in some of your client work that has made that difference, that helps the other or the CEO or the leader of that team kind of go, oh yeah, we need to think differently here on this. We can't just keep going status quo, the way that we're running this particular strategic offsite.
Absolutely. I love that you're bringing up this example, and it really makes me think of an extremely basic and I think often overlooked part of leadership decision making. And I mean leadership as in terms of top leader and leadership team and all the individuals who comprise it. What I often do with clients when I move into an offsite sort of situation like this or some high stakes decision making meeting is I say, before we get into the issues, before we talk about the specifics, let's talk about how we're going to make decisions. And it seems like so boring and so trivial and so like kind of elementary that people act like it's an absurd thing to say. And, and I have to be ready for that reaction. That's okay. I can take it. I've been doing this a while. But what I do then is I make conscious and open the basic ways that groups make decisions and leadership teams decide things. So you could make a decision by formal authority. So you got somebody who's in charge and that person decides what it is. And, then everyone just kind of deals with it. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. You could have decision by a small group. It's like we got a leadership team of 8, but 3 are making the decision, or the board's making the decision, or there's some kind of small collection of people. And sometimes, again, that's not inappropriate. There are times where that's the right way to do it. That makes sense. There are times where that really becomes challenging. There's decision making by unanimous consent, right? Like all 8 people in this meeting have to sign off, otherwise we're not doing it. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. Then there's decision making by consensus. And before I go into consensus, I believe a lot of people confuse consensus with the previous one I just mentioned, which is unanimous consent. Consensus does not mean that everybody agrees. It does not mean that all 8 people in this example think that it's the right decision. It means that all 8 people can agree or disagree and commit. Right? Now that happens right in our firm. It's happened to me where somebody, there's a decision and I'm like, yeah, I don't agree with that, but I'll support it. And when I show up, I'll tell people in the organization, this is what it is. And this is important to our firm. Now, I personally have come to believe over the years that consensus is the best process of decision making for most issues. Not all issues, clearly. There are times where there's an emergency. There are times where only, a person, maybe the top leader, knows or has all the information to make that decision, or has the right, the stakes are with that individual or the board who, like I certainly, I'm not saying that's the only framework at all ever, but I am saying for most decisions, I have found that is important, because what happens very typically is that no one's made a choice around how this decision-making process is going to happen. So people come in and they're kind of like, how does this work? Or, is this the same as last time? And then something unconsciously evolves in the moment. And then people sort of have a choice. Like, do I want to, like risk my reputation or risk my relationship with somebody in the room here to say what I really think? I don't know. And then it's like this, sweaty brow moment, and oh, I don't know, and is this, and often in my experience that leads to decisions where people have not fully bought into the process, maybe not even understand what it is, have agreed to things that they really don't agree with, are now in a position of supporting outcomes that they didn't have input in or weren't able to work through or kind of get to the point of support. And then it just becomes this sort of like chaotic, sometimes yes, sometimes no type of thing. And so I would love teams to do that small but important step at the outset of these sorts of experiences to say, how are we going to make decisions today? What's it going to look like? Here's what I think we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in this particular case, they decided not to bring in a facilitator. And so I wanted to support and coach the team around a refreshed or improved or new way of running their offsite, where they felt that they all had a say and agency. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Ultimately, the CEO requested that each 5 of the individuals in the C-suite, right? So COO, sales, like each division, um, bring their own presentation,
Hmm.
right?
Mhm.
To present to the team during this meeting was kind of his process. So I'm curious, like poke holes in that. What's good about that? What's good? What's bad about it? Like, what do you keep in that process? And it's just a one day, which is crazy to me, right? And so it just had a lot of open-ended ambiguity to it. And it just happened last week. So I'm excited to follow up and kind of hear how it
Yeah.
went. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on, in that example.
Yeah, so hearing what you just described and not knowing much else, that sounds to me like it's kind of like a democratic process, right? Like a sort of
Mhm.
let's show what we have, or share what we think, and then we'll kind of vote, or we'll the group will decide. Um, that would be my take on the scenario, given what you've said. Now, I'm sure that wasn't articulated that way, or it wasn't clear going in exactly what that was going to be. But it sounds like there's this competitive situation with different ideas, and then after a presentation of what these ideas are, the group's going to collectively vote in one way or another on
Mhm.
what they think is best. So, what would I say in response to that? Like, I mean, that doesn't sound like a terrible approach, but my question would be, are you going to have the people who didn't win the vote supporting the bigger picture and feeling good about the process of being heard and being acknowledged and being understood, and able to move forward and support it as their own decision? That would
Mhm.
be my question or my concern about that example.
Right. How would you do it differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, the principle, again, as I'm like strongly advocating consensus here, is
Yeah.
that not everybody needs to get their way, but everyone needs to get their say.
Yeah.
And so, how do we? So, I think it's great to have a marketplace of ideas. Like, that's a good thing in a general sense for most situations that I'm in. But I think the idea of empowering stakeholders to really convey what's most important to them, to be honest and candid in their assessments, for there to be a space that can hold that friction
Mhm.
with the understanding that it's for the betterment of the organization. It's not a, personal ego contest. And to explain that the group's got tough decisions to make. Decision making is not easy. Leadership is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard. And we need to create the environment where we can do the hard things.
Mhm.
And the hard things are going to be evaluating options between very compelling cases that other people are making.
Mhm.
But the point is not someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. The point is that together we can get to a better outcome through some struggle, through some challenge, through listening, through patience, through holding a long term perspective.
Mhm.
And so, if the team is able to metaphorically set the scaffolding up around that, so that there's boundaries, there's safety, there's support and protection, and then in there you get to mix it up,
Mhm.
that I think in the long term produces very positive results.
Yeah.
And so with this group, it sounds like some of that happened. And again, I don't know the full story. Some of that happened. Some of that maybe didn't happen, and could happen or should happen, or
Mhm.
maybe needs to be a part of what happens next time.
Yeah. Absolutely. What types of conversations are you having with clients right now regarding leadership and business as we wrap up this year and head into the new year? Like what themes are emerging?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I've been spending more time in the last month talking to people I coach and work with about doing simple things extraordinarily well,
Mm.
mastering the fundamentals.
Okay.
Now, I'm not naive. I understand if you're, doing certain type of work, complexity is just an inherent part of the game. But for most of the people I work with, what the vast majority of individuals are trying to do is something that's pretty straightforward and enormously hard to accomplish.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's a recruiting process, sometimes that's a development process for other people, sometimes that's a sort of like a project management, process.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of complexity when it comes to all the different issues and the environmental factors that go into it. But the process of actually doing the work is pretty straightforward, enormously hard, pretty straightforward. And so I'm spending a lot of time with clients talking about the clarity that a top leader needs to have around what the fundamentals in the business are. And I would say there's a timelessness to that. If
Hmm.
you sort of, it's like one of these things, like you start like reading, books from ancient Rome and they're talking about the same things we're talking about. So there's like a timelessness to that. But I
Hmm.
think what's changed is the environment. I mean,
Hmm.
whoa, I feel like my head is spinning, my client's head is spinning half the time, whether it's, I don't want to sound too cliched, whether it's, notifications or news stories or um, new technologies that are bursting on the scene and
Yeah.
fundamentally shifting the landscape around everyone.
Hmm.
And the fact that there's friction and ideas everywhere and people with strong opinions and just the sort of cross currents that we all walk through on a daily basis are intense and disorienting at times.
Hmm.
Sometimes this is good cross current, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's a mix of it all. But what gets missed so often, and I find what my clients are struggling with, is knowing what are the fundamentals here in my business and what do I need to execute on
Hmm.
in order to, be successful, drive the enterprise forward, and feel a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. Versus being in the hamster wheel. And what are some of those like specific, like doing the simple things extraordinary? Like what are some examples of those that you're seeing of helping get back to basics so that it does free up you and your team to be able to make decisions, right? Because it's very
Yeah.
noisy. It's very noisy.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more broadly about my clients, but I feel like it's appropriate just to start with myself.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
I'm a coach, and I got a full calendar of calls, on most days, and I'm walking in and, I'm like, I'm got, phones buzzing and there's stuff at home and stuff, here and there's stuff there. And I'm trying to figure out what to do. And then I'm looking at my calendar. Oh, I've got to get ready, okay, wait a minute. Oh, wait, that boom. What do I need to do with my clients? I need to listen.
Hmm.
I need to communicate clearly. I
Yeah.
need to stay focused on their goals. I need to conclude our calls with an outcome of to-dos.
Hmm.
That's not changed. Whether we have ChatGPT or Claude in the mix, like that hasn't changed. And as simple as that sounds, it is unbelievable how easy it is for me to show up to my calls like, oh, I haven't prepared. I'm not listening because my brain's spinning. I'm thinking about 7 things at once. I figured I knew what the client meant and interrupted them and told them what I think they need to do. That's not effective coaching. Got
Hmm.
to the end of the call. Well, we ran out of time. Well, it doesn't matter. We don't have to track this. I'll just like,
Yeah.
I need to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
and do it right and do it at a high level. And the fact that I'm up on current events and I'm exploring ways of applying ChatGPT to my work does not make those fundamentals go away.
Yeah.
So just on a personal level, I feel like, hey, I'm riding this roller coaster, along with everybody else, and I got to keep my eyes on what I do, why people are hiring me, and
Yeah.
what the work is.
Yep.
With my clients, I'm seeing people dealing with I think the Gartner hype cycle.
Mm-hmm.
If that's something that folks have worked with and have knowledge of, essentially how I would uh, uh, paraphrase or just briefly explain that is when a new innovation launches, people think it's the best thing ever and have massively inflated expectations. Then, when those don't come true, people think it's the worst thing ever and it's awful and evil and needs to go away. And then, after a little bit of time, it settles at the right level. And so, what I'm experiencing with my clients is that new innovations are entering their space and people are freaking out about the unbelievable opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
then when, water doesn't turn into wine and all these other miracles don't happen, then they're freaking out and punishing this innovation. And then after a while, it settles into its normal space and then they get to it. But along the way, my clients are feeling, nauseous from this ride.
Yeah.
And that is taking them off the fundamentals of what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's turning it into this chase game and reactive game with the people who they need to be influencing and supporting and all of that. And so, what I'm trying to do is say your job is not to react to people's irrational exuberance or unfair punishment of all these new things entering their world. Your job is to look ahead and see where this is going to land as best you can and help coach people there and help guide them to a place of sanity and stability and integration of new things.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering that whatever these new innovations are going to be, the role of them is to help you do the fundamentals of your work better.
Yeah. I think the thing that's really resonating with me is that with all that's going on in innovation and the planet and the world is that everyone's in a rush and wants the shortcut or the secret sauce is like a constant theme,
Yeah,
right? Of, oh, what's the thing? What's the checklist? What's the recipe? Just give it to me, right? And
absolutely.
yeah, and so that's definitely a theme and a place that I'm meeting my clients at it because it's just the chaos, but they're just spinning around on the hamster wheel. I'm like, okay, hold on a second, right? Let's stop the hamster wheel. Let's pull you out.
Yes. Yes. To that end, I wanted to ask, like, what in terms of what you're encountering here, thinking of like connecting decisions to strategy, what are you coming across and seeing, and how are you addressing those issues?
The biggest thing that I'm working on right now with my clients is fundamentally being able to be disciplined at scheduling in more space in your day
Mm, mm,
because the level of strategic thinking, for example, that my CEO client needs to do, right, isn't going to happen sitting at your desk all day long, fielding Slack messages,
yeah.
right, and answering texts from your team. And that's what I've really been trying to help. And it has to be their scheduling, their creative, right? I have one client who just can't calendar block for the life of themselves, right? But it's like, how can I help this leader understand that big strategic thinking that moves to a decision, right, with lots of inputs over a certain period of time? You have to have space for that. And that could mean you're going to the gym first thing in the morning on the treadmill and not listening to podcasts or books on tape, right? And so I've really been playful, but also trying to provide different frameworks. Okay, that's not working. What's going to, in creating more space for people, because there's just so much noise, right? And so it does go back to fundamentals of, okay, everything's just gotten so noisy between news cycles and social media and what all these leaders need to be doing and reading and listening to. I feel like anymore, you'll look around and everyone's got their earbuds in listening to something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been coming at a place from how can we tune out the noise for the last 2 months of the year to give yourself space to be thinking through those strategic items, through new innovations for the company. It's a noisy time. And then especially around the holidays, you have leaders that then have the added pressure of family responsibilities, right? So this is a really tough time of year for most leaders. I don't care how big your family is or isn't, it's just a lot. And so leaning into what it looks like and what it means to practice daily with discipline to create more space and quiet as a leader so that you can make strategic decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Something was coming to mind, and so honestly, I hadn't had this thought until just now. So this is the grand unveiling of a new concept here. So you heard it here first, I guess. The entire time that I've been in the workforce, that is when did I officially 1995 or something like that. Innovation has been driven by disruption. That something's going to come in and break or blow up or redirect, something that is existed or it's been the, standard operating procedure over time. Yeah, we're not lacking disruption anymore. Right? Like we are not struggling to face, disruptive forces in our world. We have personal, professional, financial, right? All the realms are it's like disruption feels like the norm at this point. I think the innovation moving forward is going to be coherence.
Yeah.
How do you actually have coherence? And that sounds maybe at first like a little like, really? Is that's your big insight? But I can't tell you how much time I've spent in the last couple of years with my clients. And after, towards the end of the session, I'm just saying to myself, like, what are we even talking about? Like, are we still talking about the business that you're in and the, goals and vision you signed up for? Because it sounds like we're talking about something fundamentally different or completely, alien to that. So how do you take all these things in our environment and bring them into your space and create a sense of coherence that things fit together, things are aligned, things are connected in a way that creates flow and, meaning and output.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do anymore. I mean, maybe it was never easy to do before, but it feels like it's like hurricane force winds in everyone's face right now when it comes to a sense of coherence in an organization.
Yes. I mean, not like we're saying anything about fires and natural disasters, but I mean, using that analogy, I think is so important right now because it does feel that way, right? And what I hear you saying is stopping and pausing and saying, hold on a second, right? goes back to creating more space to really slow down, tune out the noise. Literally, I'm so used to coming into my office in the morning and turning on a podcast or music. And I asked myself today, what would the day feel like if there was no noise on in my office? And how would that, send a signal or more data for me when I'm planning? I always do my next week planning on Sunday. Like how would that inform how I would go about a little bit differently next week, right? So that you can have coherence to make those decisions. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am loving this. We're kind of like getting ready to land the plane. It's the end of the year. I mean, anything else, messaging wise or words or inspiration to the world, to our clients?
Yeah. I've never felt more disoriented. I mean, given all the things that, we've been talking about in this conversation here today, with all the, innovation and disruption and new things coming. And I've never felt, I think, more optimistic about human potential than I have now. I would say that the clients I work with, and I'm sure you're feeling the same way with many or all of your clients, is the vast majority of people have a very good faith approach and are really trying and doing good work and hard work. And I have seen so many of my clients become or transform as leaders and go from someone who was great at pep talks and, sort of basic messaging into dynamic leaders who are able to balance, blend, and integrate all these different forces that they're facing and dealing with, and be able to go from a, contributor, basic leader to powerful leader in, a relatively short amount of time. What I would have said, 2 decades ago would be a very condensed period of time. And so I'm not sure about all the stuff happening, to us and around the world. And, when it comes to, is this change good? Is this change, bad? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out later. Maybe we know already. But I have never seen so many people in my life grow, expand, and emerge as powerful people, powerful men, women, leaders, sovereigns. And that continues to inspire me every day.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thanks for being here today, David. And for anyone listening in, we have part 1 and 2 of this series as well. We'll drop some information down below to some of the other tools that we've been using, and just excited to end the year on a high note with you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mel. It's been wonderful.
Yeah.